Wow. Wow. I understand that we have a caller on the line already. Caller, thank you for calling in. Questions or comments for us this evening?
Well, I just have a couple of comments. This is Ralph calling in. And what I'm really getting out of this so far, and I picked up on it, is that it seems like every permit and grant costs $1,000. But the other thing is I want to talk about is the fact that the Grant City Hall, or whatever they call it there, is the People's Hall, not the Council's Hall. And I picked up on the last meeting that you had that the 4-H and the Boy Scouts and that cannot use the People's Building. Now that really sounds ludicrous to me, that the people can't use their own building, and this was the things that I wanted to touch on, and I want to listen to the rest of your program, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much for calling in, caller. And obviously, this is a viewer who watches on a regular basis and heard about the $1,000 permit to sell pumpkins at the end of a driveway that we talked about the last program. So there you go. So are all the permits in Grant $1,000?
No, all the permits are not $1,000, Diane. What that was an escrow.
Ah, okay.
So if it's unused at the end of the season, they get their money.
Oh, I see.
The unused portion back. So it's not a $1,000 fee. It's a $1,000 escrow, which allows them to get their money back, basically, so that if there's any damages or city costs, they're offset in that fee.
Right. Well, and I think you know, again, this idea about you know, when you're developing a new ordinance and you want to encourage your citizens to be able to, like say for instance, implement wind energy, it has to be practical. Otherwise, why would people ever do it? And did they talk a lot about the tree height versus the height of the pole?
We had several folks on the city council that were opposed to wind energy based on aesthetic reasons. They believed that wind energy was ugly, and as a result, if you couldn't see it, you know, then it was viable. But if you, and I tried to point out to them that behind City Hall, we have a 100-foot high cell tower.
I noticed that. I noticed that cell tower, yes.
Okay. You can only see it from one side if you look at it through our parking lot. On all the other sides, in fact, if you stand right in front of Town Hall, you cannot see this 100-foot tower because it's effectively screened by the trees and Town Hall. So with proper screening, you could have made wind energy viable in the city of Grant. But you know, if you're opposed, if on aesthetic reasons you don't want it, and you feel that it's ugly, I personally don't believe that, and I think as a renewable energy is an important source as we have to go away from fossil fuels.
Right, exactly. And one of the things that they certainly could have done is that they could have asked for, say for instance, a line of sight diagram to show exactly what you're talking about with regard to that cell tower. Because if you're looking here and you're at a certain height and your trees are a certain height and you look at it, there's a line of sight diagrams that any of the different planners are very well aware of how to do line of sight diagrams. And for a lot of our viewers out there who are from Maplewood, you may have noticed that the planner there for Grant, of course, is Jennifer Haskamp, of course, who helped Maplewood working on some of the open space task force issues and working with Maplewood. And I know that she's familiar with a lot of those kinds of issues of citizen involvement and engagement in developing public policy. And I know that she knows about line of sight issues and migratory bird patterns and all those things because they talked about all those things in Maplewood. So she's got the in on that. So you could ask her about that.
I certainly will.
Yeah. But anyway, now I see we have another caller on the line. Steve, you don't even get to speak.
Well, that's okay.
Let's take our caller and then we're going to hear from Steve. Okay, caller, thank you for calling in. Questions or comments this evening? We'll get the volume out here, the call out here. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I'm calling to see if it's more effective to engage our youth in like a 4-H program to get them involved, rather than waiting till they get in trouble. Let them out on the Huber law on the sentence of serve, because that's who's painting our town hall now instead of our 4-H group and our youth. I think it's more effective to grab them at a young age and keep them out of trouble.
Good point, and I think this is an excellent question to lob on over to Steve and talking about that whole issue about engaging the youth in the community of Grant so that they, first of all, are interested in remaining in Grant and also, are, part of the community.
Well, a struggle that is going on right now, and it's very frustrating for some of the folks. One of the callers had mentioned that the 4-H isn't allowed in the building, and that isn't a true statement. What's happening is the 4-H still uses the building to have their meetings, but they're not allowed to have their banner up that they make once a year, the annual banner. And instead of letting the kids hang it up in this 100-year-old schoolhouse, it fits, it looks great, not a problem there. But instead of doing that or explaining why they're not doing that, the kids know that they can't put their banner up. And we had a lady come up at a couple of meetings ago, and the last meeting, and she had the banner and had her kids with and asked the mayor to please, let them hang the banner back up. And the mayor doesn't even respond to the questions during public comment. And I don't understand that, because some questions he will respond to, or councilman will respond to, but other times you ask questions. I asked a couple of questions at the last meeting, and it's almost been a month, and nobody has given me an answer to my 2 questions.
Now, what were your 2 questions?
My 2 questions were, I'm running for city council, obviously, and our road commissioner, Councilman Hinseth, he's a councilman and he's a road commissioner. And he's out traveling the streets, he's getting paid mileage, he's getting a paid cell phone, and he's doing his job, stopping to ask people, what do you think of the nice job I just did? I just put some magnesium chloride down. By the way, can I put a sign in your yard? So and I've been hearing this on the campaign trail, and it's bothered me a little bit, and I thought, well, I'm going to ask at the city council meeting if we have a policy in place. Well, he's the first road commissioner to ever collect any mileage, and he's the first road commissioner to ever get a paid cell phone. So I asked the mayor, I said, is there a policy in place to make sure that he's not crossing that line and talking to people while he's on city business collecting revenue? So, and I asked if there is a policy in place, who's reviewing it? And they wouldn't give me an answer. You look at their blank faces, and ears too.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
and nobody talks. And so you ask the question, and nobody has gotten back to me. It's been 3 weeks, and not a councilman has called me to say, hey, yes, we're reviewing it. Yes, we're watching it. Yes, we're going to have him, make sure he doesn't cross it. Nothing.
And I watched that part on the council meeting when I watched the last council meeting, and there were 2 things that kind of came to my mind. One is that if there isn't a policy, there probably should be. You can put it in that council policy and procedure manual. And then the other thing is that a couple times ago when I was in Louisiana, south of New Orleans, there's a little tip, I forget now the name of the county that it was, but I was busy talking to some citizens down there, and they were talking about the way politics are done down in Louisiana down there, and that the politician, they take the shells and they grind them up, and then they go and they dump a load of shells on somebody's driveway and spread it out, and that's a way that they curry political favor. And that's the way they do politics down in Louisiana. And so when I heard you talking about that in front of the council, I thought to myself, hey, I've heard about this policy before. They do that in Louisiana. So I don't know. So it's not new. And maybe it's unintended up here, but it is intended in Louisiana. So very interesting.
I was thinking about it after I asked the question and I didn't get an answer, and I thought, well, if I was in their shoes, you know, how would I answer it? And the thing that would make the most sense to me is if you do have a city councilman that's collecting mileage for driving around, just to make sure that that line doesn't get crossed, it would be nice if that, you know, councilman or that, you know, appointee gives up their mileage for the 60 or 90 days before the election. It would be a real, because our city's so small, nobody's going to follow around and make sure that he's not, you know, on that trip, it's not, this mileage didn't get charged. But a quick, easy way to do it is to forfeit, if you're going to campaign, forfeit your mileage or your salary if you're campaigning. It would be a very nice gesture that would take the concern out.
Exactly. Or that there's some kind of a cap, because I'm sure by now there must be some measurement of how many miles are traveled on an average. Right? Maybe?
Well,
I'm not sure.
Our road commissioner, councilman, he travels the roads, he charges us 58.5 cents a mile for his travel. The IRS only allows 50 cents, so that's actually 8.5 cents of income, not just mileage reimbursement, but that's actually income. But that can be adjusted and so forth. But when he's out doing this, it would be hard to not have a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
It really would. And I can't believe that there isn't a conflict of interest, and I don't think that they're looking into it. We asked at the last meeting.
Well, and you know that question does come up from time to time on various councils, because there have been councils in the past, not necessarily in Grant, but in other communities, where somebody who has who is a police officer might be on the council, or who's a paid per call, a volunteer fireman is on the council, those kinds of things. And of course it's been determined that's not necessarily a conflict of interest, but the question is that I think more particularly in your issue is, are they campaigning on city time?
Correct.
And that's where there's the distinction is, you know, you're not really supposed to be campaigning on city time when you're working as a city employee.
Exactly.
And so that's where I think it's very important that people, when they have that dual role, so to speak, that they're mindful of that. Yeah, go ahead.
I absolutely agree with you. One of the solutions in this situation would be that the road commissioner should not be an appointed council member. It would be a very easy problem to solve if we had an independent party, citizen volunteer that was the road commissioner that was not a council member. But we've had other conflict of interest issues. The same council member who's our road commissioner, when he was elected in 2006, wanted to continue as the city brusher and be paid as the city brusher and work and be able to vote on his own brushing contracts. And that was a clear conflict of
the
interest.
League of Minnesota Cities, I believe, would say that would be a conflict, because you have a financial benefit that you're gaining from your vote.
And
yes,
I brought that to our city attorney at the first council meeting, and that was resolved. But I mean, it was very clear. I mean, the conflict of interest, it's an issue that we don't want to be faced with in the city. And if you can create good policy to prevent even a hint of it arising, that's what we should be striving to achieve.
Exactly. Go ahead.
You know, it's an interesting point is that a couple of years ago, I think 3 years ago, they had a vote at the city council to what the road commissioner's mileage would be, and that's where they set the 58.5 cents. And Kim Lanier, Councilwoman Lanier, she made the made the motion, and then Brad Hinseth, he wanted to add a friendly amendment to that motion, saying that he would like the 58.5 cents, which was a raise, he would like it retroactive put in so that it went back.
Oh.
So he completely voted on his own mileage. So now, at the last meeting, when it was brought to everybody's attention that the IRS only allows 50 cents a mile, so you've got 8.5 cents a mile of actual income, when they suggested that he bring that down